The autumn wind carried the scent of dying grass across the Montana territory as Sam Crawford rode his weary horse toward his small ranch. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson that reminded him of better days when laughter echoed through these same valleys. When love had made even the harshest frontier seem like paradise. 3 years had passed since Clara had vanished from his life like morning mist, leaving behind only questions and a heart that refused to heal. Sam pulled his worn hat lower over his eyes, trying to push away memories that haunted him more fiercely than any ghost. The war had taken much from him, but losing Clara had nearly destroyed what remained of his soul. As he approached his modest cabin, something caught his eye near the old oak tree that stood sentinel beside his barn. A small figure huddled against the massive trunk, barely visible in the fading light. Sam's hand instinctively moved to the Colt at his hip, but as he drew closer, his defensive stance melted into concern. It was a child, a native boy, no more than 7 or 8 years old. His clothes tattered and his small frame trembling from cold and hunger. Dark eyes, wide with fear and desperation, looked up at Sam with the kind of plea that transcended language and culture. Sam dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He'd learned enough during his years on the frontier to know that trust was a fragile thing, especially between a white man and a native child who had likely been taught to fear his kind. "Easy there, little one," Sam said softly, his voice carrying the same gentle tone he'd once used to calm spooked horses. "I'm not going to hurt you." The boy pressed himself further against the tree, but his eyes never left Sam's face, searching for any sign of kindness in a world that had shown him precious little. Sam could see the sharp angles of hunger beneath the child's weathered clothing, the hollow look that spoke of days without food, without sudden movements. Sam reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a piece of hardtack in his water canteen. He set them on the ground between himself and the boy, then backed away several steps. "Go ahead, Sam," encouraged, gesturing toward the food. "It's not much, but it's yours." The child's resolve crumbled in the face of desperate hunger. He lunged forward, grabbing the hardtack and devouring it with the fierce intensity of someone who hadn't eaten in days. Sam watched with a mixture of pity and understanding. He'd known that kind of hunger himself during the war. When supplies ran low and hope ran even lower, as the boy drank from the canteen, Sam noticed something that made his breath catch. Around the child's neck hung a small beaded necklace with a distinctive pattern, turquoise and silver threads woven in a design he recognized from years past. It was the same pattern Clara had admired so often at the trading post, the same design she'd traced with her finger while talking about the beauty she saw in native craftsmanship. "Where did you get that?" Sam asked, pointing to the necklace. The boy's hand moved protectively to the beads, but he said nothing. Sam realized the child likely didn't speak English, or at least not enough to have a conversation. But there was something in those young eyes, a flicker of recognition when Sam mentioned the necklace, that suggested this meeting was more than mere chance. "On," Sam said, rising and gesturing toward his cabin. "It's going to be cold. Tonight, you can stay here." The boy hesitated, torn between fear and the promise of warmth and food. Finally, hunger and exhaustion won out over caution, and he followed Sam toward the small log structure that had been home for the past 3 years. Inside, Sam lit an oil lamp and stoked the fire in his stone hearth. The warm glow revealed a simple but comfortable, spacious single room with a bed, a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, and shelves lined with books and personal belongings. On the mantel sat a daguerreotype in a silver frame, the image of a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. The boy's gaze fixed on the photograph, and Sam noticed his sharp intake of breath. There was definitely recognition there, but of what Sam couldn't say. "That's Clara," Sam said softly, following the child's gaze. She was going to be my wife." Sam prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, watching as the boy ate, with the methodical focus of someone making up for lost time. As the child's hunger was satisfied, exhaustion took over, and soon he was curled up on a blanket near the fire, fast asleep. Sam sat in his chair, studying the sleeping child and trying to piece together the puzzle. The necklace, the recognition. In the boy's eyes when he saw Clara's photograph, the timing of his appearance, none of it, felt like coincidence. In his experience, the frontier rarely dealt in coincidences. He thought back to that terrible day 3 years ago when Clara had disappeared. They'd been planning their wedding, making preparations for a life together on his ranch. She'd been visiting the nearby Crow village, where she taught reading to some of the children, a controversial choice that had earned her criticism from many in the nearby town of Bitter Creek, but one that Sam had admired her for making. Clara had always seen beyond the prejudices that divided people. She believed in the fundamental goodness of humanity, regardless of race or creed. It was one of the many things that had made Sam fall so deeply in love with her. That final morning, she'd kissed him goodbye and ridden toward the village as she had dozens of times before. But this time, she never came back. A search party found her horse wandering riderless near the river, but no trace of Clara herself. Some blamed raiders, others suggested she'd fallen in the water and been swept away. The official conclusion was that she was dead, another victim of the dangerous frontier life. But Sam had never been able to accept that explanation. Something in his heart insisted she was still alive, somewhere beyond his reach, but not beyond hope. It was a foolish belief, perhaps, but it was all that had kept him going through the dark months that followed. Now, looking at this mysterious child, Sam felt that old hope stirring again. There were too many connections, too many signs pointing toward something larger than a simple act of charity. The boy slept peacefully through the night, but Sam dozed fitfully in his chair, his dreams filled with memories of Clara's laughter and the persistent feeling that his world was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Dawn came slowly, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. Sam woke to find the boy, already awake, sitting up and staring out the window with an expression of intense concentration. Following his gaze, Sam looked outside and felt his blood turn to ice. Stretched across the ridge that overlooked his ranch were nearly 200 native warriors mounted on painted horses and silhouetted against the morning sky. They sat motionless as statues, but their presence was unmistakably threatening. War paint, feathered headdresses, and weapons glinted in the early light. Sam's hand moved instinctively to his rifle, but he stopped himself. No, 200 warriors against one man was no contest, and any show of aggression would likely mean certain death. Instead, he looked down at the boy, who was watching him with those same dark, intelligent eyes. "They're here for you, aren't they?" Sam asked quietly. Boy nodded solemnly, then surprised Sam by speaking in clear, accented English. "They are my people. They come because I did not return." "You speak English. My mother taught me. She said it was important to understand both worlds." The boy's voice carried a gravity that seemed far beyond his years. "Your mother?" The child reached into his shirt and pulled out a small piece of paper, folded and worn from handling. He handed it to Sam with the reverence of someone presenting a sacred object. Sam unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a letter written in a familiar script that made his heart stop. Clara's handwriting as clear and beautiful as he remembered. "My dearest Sam," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then little Wolf has found you as I prayed he would. I am alive, though not free to return to you as my heart desires. 3 years ago I was taken during a raid, but not by enemies, by a desperate band of Crow who mistook me for someone else. By the time they realized their error, their chief's son was dying of fever, and they begged me to help heal him. I could not refuse." Sam's hands shook as he continued reading. The words seemed to blur and swim before his eyes, but he forced himself to focus. "I saved the boy's life, and in gratitude, the chief offered me a place among his people. But there was a price I could never leave, never return to the white world, or it would be seen as a betrayal that would bring war between our peoples. I chose to stay rather than see innocent blood spilled, but not a day passes that I do not think of you and the life we planned together. Little Wolf is my adopted son, the child of a woman who died giving birth. I have taught him about you, about the love we shared, about the man I left behind. If something happens to me, I have instructed him to find you. Please protect him, as I know you would protect our own children. had we been blessed with them. Know that I love you still, with every breath in my body and every beat of my heart.
Oh.
If there is a way for us to be together again without bringing harm to others, I will find it. Till then, I remain forever yours, Clara. Life. Sam expanded the cabin to include a guest room where visitors could stay, while Clara planted a garden with both traditional frontier vegetables and medicinal herbs. She'd learned to cultivate during her time with the crow. Little Wolf proved invaluable in helping them prepare for their role as mediators. His natural intelligence and bilingual abilities made him an ideal translator. While his youthful perspective often provided insights that the adults missed, their first real test came sooner than expected. A group of settlers from Bitter Creek arrived at the ranch one morning, demanding to know why Sam was harboring savages and threatening to take action if he didn't send them away. Sam met the group in his front yard, Clara and Little Wolf standing beside him in a show of unity. The settlers were led by Jake Morrison, a man who'd never liked Sam and had been openly critical of Clara's work with native children before her disappearance. Well, Morrison said with a sneer, so the rumors are true? Sam Crawford has gone native, brought himself a squaw and her brat to live in sin on his property. Sam felt his temper flare, but Clara's gentle touch on his arm reminded him of their mission. They were here to build bridges, not burn them. Jake, Sam said calmly, I'd like you to meet my wife Clara and our son, Little Wolf. We're building a life here based on respect and understanding, and we'd welcome the chance to share that with our neighbors. Your wife? Morrison laughed harshly. You can't marry a savage, Crawford. It ain't legal, ain't Christian, and it sure ain't right. We were married according to both Christian and Crow traditions, Clara spoke up, her voice steady despite the obvious hostility directed at her. Our union has been blessed by leaders of both faiths. I don't care what kind of heathen ceremony you went through, Morrison spat. This is a white settlement, and we don't want your kind here. Little Wolf stepped forward, his young voice clear and strong. My people taught me that all men are children of the same Creator, he said in perfect English. They taught me to show respect to my elders and kindness to strangers. What did your people teach you? The question hung in the air, and Sam could see several of the settlers looking uncomfortable. These were not evil men, just frightened and prejudiced ones. And Little Wolf's innocent query had exposed the contradiction in their attitudes. Look, Sam said, seizing the moment of uncertainty, I understand your concerns. Change is hard, and there's been a lot of bad blood between our peoples. But Clara and I aren't asking you to change your beliefs overnight. We're just asking you to give peace a chance, and what's in it for us? Asked another settler, a man named Peterson who owned a small farm to the east. What if conflicts could be resolved through talking instead of fighting? Clara suggested. What if we could help prevent the kind of violence that costs lives and destroys families on both sides? You mean when the Indians come raiding, we should just sit down and have tea with them? Morrison scoffed. I mean when there are misunderstandings or disputes? Maybe we could help both sides communicate before anyone gets hurt, Clara replied patiently. Most conflicts start with fear and miscommunication, if we can address those root causes. The discussion continued for over an hour, with emotions running high on both sides. But gradually, Sam noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Several of the settlers began asking genuine questions about Crow customs and beliefs, while others shared their own fears about Indian raids and cultural differences. By the time the group prepared to leave, the hostility had decreased noticeably. They weren't converts to Sam and Clara's cause, but they weren't planning to take immediate action either. It was a small victory, but an important one. It went better than I expected, Clara said as they watched the settlers ride away. A start, Sam agreed. The change happened slowly, one conversation at a time. Over the following months, Sam and Clara worked tirelessly to build relationships with both communities. They hosted dinners that brought together people from different backgrounds, mediated disputes before they could escalate into violence, and gradually earned respect through their consistent commitment to fairness and understanding. Little Wolf thrived in his role as cultural interpreter, helping visitors from both sides navigate unfamiliar customs and find common ground. His intelligence and natural charm made him popular with children from both communities. And Sam often found their ranch filled with young people of all backgrounds playing together, with the unconscious ease that adults had forgotten. The real test of their mission came in the spring, when a dispute arose over grazing rights near the Crow village. White ranchers claimed the land was theirs by government treaty, while the Crow insisted it had been hunting grounds for generations and was essential for their survival. Both sides were preparing for armed conflict when Stone Bear sent a messenger to Sam and Clara, asking for their help. They arrived at the disputed territory to find two armed camps facing each other across a meadow that was beautiful enough to die for, but not worth dying for. Sam and Clara spent 3 days moving between the camps, listening to grievances, explaining each side's position to the other, and gradually working toward a compromise. It was exhausting, frustrating work. It's complicated by years of mutual distrust and competing claims of justice. But finally, they achieved a breakthrough. The white ranchers agreed to share the grazing land during certain seasons, while the Crow would have exclusive access during their traditional hunting times. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable, and it avoided the bloodshed that had seemed inevitable just days earlier. "You did it," Stone Bear said to Sam and Clara as the agreement was finalized. "You found a way for both sides to win." "We all did it," Clara corrected. "People on both sides chose to listen instead of fight. We just helped facilitate the conversation." Word of their success spread quickly, and soon Sam and Clara were being called upon to mediate disputes throughout the territory. They helped resolve conflicts over water rights, trading disagreements, and cultural misunderstandings. Not every case ended in complete success, but their win rate was high enough to earn them respect from both communities. Their personal life flourished as well. Clara's health fully recovered, and she threw herself into the work of building their ranch into a true home. She started a school that welcomed children from all backgrounds, teaching them to read and write in both English and Crow, while instilling values of tolerance and respect. Sam expanded his livestock operation and began trading with both white and native communities, serving as a trusted intermediary in commercial relationships that might otherwise have been complicated by cultural barriers. And in the autumn of their second year together, Clara gave birth to their first child, a daughter. They named Hope in honor of the future they were working to build. Stone Bear traveled from the village to bless the baby according to Crow traditions, while the local minister performed a Christian baptism, making Hope a child of both worlds from her very first days. As Sam held his daughter on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a simple act of kindness, feeding a hungry child, and had grown into something larger and more meaningful than he could ever have imagined. Clara joined him on the porch, little Wolf at her side, and together they watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. In the distance, they could see the lights of Bitter Creek, where people were learning to see past their prejudices. To the north, smoke from the Crow village reminded them of the family they'd gained and the responsibilities they'd accepted. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked softly. "This life we've chosen, the complications, the constant work of building bridges." Sam considered the question seriously. Their life was indeed complicated, filled with challenges that most couples never faced. They dealt with prejudice from both sides, constant travel to mediate disputes, and the ongoing responsibility of serving as examples of what was possible when love conquered fear. But as he looked at Clara, radiant in the lamplight with their daughter in her arms and little Wolf leaning against her side, Sam knew his answer. "Never," he said firmly. "This is the life we were meant to live. These are the people we were meant to be." Clara smiled, the expression lighting up her face with joy. "I love you, Sam Crawford. Today, tomorrow, and for all the years to come. I love you too, Clara Crawford, more than words can say." As if summoned by their words, little Wolf looked up from the book he'd been reading. "Will you tell me the story again?" he asked. "About how you found each other." Sam and Clara exchanged glances, remembering that morning so long ago when the starving child had appeared at Sam's ranch, carrying with him the key to their redemption. "Once upon a time," Clara began, her voice warm with love and memory, "a cowboy helped a starving native child. He didn't know it then, but that's simple. act of kindness was about to change his life forever. And as she told their story under the endless western sky, with stars appearing one by one like promises in the darkness, Sam understood that this was how legends were really born, not through grand gestures or heroic deeds, but through ordinary people choosing love over fear, understanding over hatred, hope over despair. Their story would be told around campfires and dinner. "She speaks of you often," Little Wolf continued, "especially when she looks toward the south, toward your home. She carries great sadness, but also great love." The words were both comforting and painful. Sam was glad to know that Clara still thought of him, still carried their love in her heart. But knowing that she was suffering because of their separation made his own pain feel sharper. It's more immediate. As the sun reached its zenith, the war party crested a ridge, and Sam got his first view of the Crow village. It was larger than he'd expected. Dozens of tipis arranged in careful patterns along the banks of a meandering river, with horse herds grazing in the meadows beyond and children playing in the shallows of the stream. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and Sam could see women working at various tasks while men tended to weapons and horses. It was a scene of peaceful domesticity that contrasted sharply with the popular image of savage Indians that prevailed in many white communities. As the war party approached the village, people began emerging from their homes to see what was happening. Word spread quickly, and soon a crowd had gathered to watch the unusual sight of a white man riding in their midst. Sam felt the weight of dozens of stares, some curious, some suspicious, some openly hostile. But his attention was focused entirely on finding Clara among the faces. He scanned the crowd desperately, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. What if she had changed beyond recognition? What if 3 years among the Crow had transformed her into someone he no longer knew? Then he saw her, standing in the doorway of a tipi near the center of the village, and his breath caught in his throat. She was thinner than he remembered. Her golden hair was now braided in the native style. But her face was unmistakably Clara's, the same gentle eyes, the same kind smile, the same beauty that had captured his heart so completely. Their eyes met across the space of the village, and Sam saw his own joy and disbelief reflected in her expression. For a moment, time seemed suspended, and all the pain and longing of the past 3 years collapsed into a single point of perfect connection. Then Clara stumbled, her hand going to the doorframe for support, and Sam realized how truly ill she was. Even at this distance, he could see the fever flush in her cheeks and the tremor in her movements. Sam dismounted without waiting for permission and started toward her. But Stone Bear's voice stopped him. "Wait," the war chief commanded. "There are protocols to be observed. You cannot simply rush to her side." Sam forced himself to stop, though every instinct screamed at him to gather Clara in his arms and never let her go again. He understood that he was a guest here, subject to laws and customs that were not his own. Stone Bear dismounted as well and approached the tipi where Clara waited. He spoke to her in Crow, and Sam heard Clara respond in the same language, her voice weak but determined. The conversation went on for several minutes, with other tribal members occasionally adding their voices to the discussion. Finally, Stone Bear turned back to Sam. "She wishes to speak with you, but you must understand she is very sick. Do not excite her or cause her additional stress." "Ah!" Sam nodded eagerly and followed Stone Bear toward the tipi. As he drew closer, he could see the fever burning in Clara's eyes and the way she swayed slightly on her feet. But her smile was as radiant as ever, transforming her face with joy. "Sam," she whispered, and the sound of his name on her lips, after so many years of silence, nearly brought him to his knees. "Clara, my God, Clara, I thought you were dead. I wanted to come back to you so many times, but I couldn't." Her voice trailed off as another wave of fever swept over her. "Don't talk now," Sam said gently. "Let me take care of you. Let me help you get well." Clara nodded weakly and allowed him to help her back into the tipi. Inside, Sam found a space that was both foreign and familiar, decorated with native crafts and symbols, but also containing books and writing materials that spoke of Clara's continued connection to her own culture. On a small table beside her, bed, Sam noticed a collection of letters in his own handwriting. They were the letters he'd written to her during their courtship. Letters she'd apparently treasured enough to carry with her into this new life. "You kept them," he said, picking up one of the yellowed pages. "They were all I had of you. On the darkest nights, when I thought I might forget the sound of your voice, I would read them and remember." Sam knelt beside her bed, taking her hand in his. Her skin was burning with fever, and he could feel the rapid flutter of her pulse beneath his fingers. Whatever illness had taken hold of her was serious, potentially fatal. "Tell me about your symptoms," he said, shifting into the practical mindset that had served him well during the war. "When did the fever start? Have you been eating? Drinking enough water?" Clara described her illness in detail, and Sam recognized the signs of a serious infection, possibly pneumonia or something similar. He'd seen similar cases during the war, and he knew that prompt treatment with the right herbs and medicines could make the difference between recovery and death. "I brought some of your old remedies," Sam said, reaching for his saddlebags. "The herbs you taught me to recognize, the medicines you used to prepare." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You kept them? After all this time? Kept everything? Your books, your medicines, your clothes? I couldn't bear to let go of any piece of you." Sam began preparing a healing tea from the herbs he'd brought. Other members of the tribe gathered around the tipi. Stone Bear stood in the doorway watching Sam's every move with the intensity of a man whose daughter's life hung in the balance. The tribal medicine man, an elderly man with deeply lined skin and wise eyes, approached and began examining Clara's condition. Sam tensed, unsure whether his presence would be seen as interference or insult to the traditional healer. But the medicine man surprised him by nodding approvingly at Sam's choice of herbs and even suggesting a few additional plants that grew locally and might boost the healing properties of the tea. "The spirits brought you here for a reason," the old man said in careful English. "Sometimes healing comes from unexpected places." Over the next several days, Sam rarely left Clara's side. He administered medicines, monitored her fever, and gradually nursed her back toward health. The tribal medicine man worked alongside him, combining traditional native healing practices with the frontier remedies that Clara had taught Sam years earlier. Slowly, Clara's fever broke, and her strength began to return. Color came back to her cheeks, and her appetite improved. But even as her physical health recovered, Sam could see the emotional strain of their reunion taking its toll on both of them. They were together again, but not free to be together. Clara was bound to the tribe by honor and gratitude, while Sam remained an outsider whose presence was tolerated but not embraced by all members of the community. On the fourth evening of his stay, as Clara sat up in bed for the first time since his arrival, she finally voiced the question that had been hanging between them. "What happens now, Sam? Can't stay here permanently, and I can't leave. We destined to love each other from a distance for the rest of our lives." Sam had been wrestling with the same question since his arrival. He'd considered every possibility, from taking Clara away by force to remaining in the village permanently. But neither option seemed realistic or fair to the people who had shown them both such kindness. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know that I'm not giving up. There has to be a way for us to be together without bringing harm to your adopted family." At night, as Clara slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, Sam walked through the village under a canopy of stars. The crow people he passed nodded, politely but kept their distance, and he could sense the underlying tension his presence had created. He found Stone Bear sitting by the dying embers of a fire, smoking a pipe and staring up at the night sky. The war chief acknowledged Sam's approach with a slight nod but said nothing. "I want to thank you," Sam said, settling down beside the older man, "for allowing me to come here, for letting me help her." "You love her very much," Stone Bear observed. "It wasn't a question. It's more than my own life. And she loves you the same way. It creates a problem." Sam waited, sensing that Stone Bear had more to say. "When she first came to us," the war chief continued, "she was grieving, not just for her lost life, but for you. She saved my grandson's life, but in doing so, she condemned herself to a kind of living death, live but unable to truly live." "Then let her go," Sam said quietly. "Let her come home with me." Stone Bear shook his head. It is not so simple. There are members of my band who see her presence as a sacred trust. They believe that to let her leave would anger the spirits, would bring misfortune upon our people. And what do you believe?" The older man was quiet for a long time, puffing on his pipe and watching the smoke drift up toward the stars. "I believe," he said finally, "that the spirits care more about love and happiness than they do about rigid adherence to old promises." Hope flickered in Sam's chest. "Then there might be a way? Perhaps. But it would require great courage from both of you, and great trust from my people." Stone Bear explained his idea, and Sam listened with growing excitement and trepidation. It was a risky plan, one that could easily go wrong and result in tragedy for everyone involved. But it also offered the possibility of a future that Sam's vision blurred with tears he'd held back for 3 long years. Clara was alive. After all this time, after all the nights he'd lain awake wondering, she was alive. But she was also beyond his reach, trapped by circumstances and honor in a world that might as well be on the other side of the earth. He looked down at Little Wolf, seeing Clara in the boy's intelligent eyes and gentle manner. This child represented everything Sam had lost and everything he still hoped to regain. "She sent you to me," Sam said, his voice rough with emotion. "She is sick," Little Wolf replied simply. "The winter has been hard, and the fever has come again. The medicine man cannot help her. She asked me to bring you this." He reached into his shirt again and produced a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. Inside was Clara's engagement ring, the simple gold band with a small diamond that had belonged to Sam's mother. Clara had been wearing it the day she disappeared, and seeing it now felt like being struck by lightning. "She wants you to have it back," Little Wolf said. She said, ... She said if she cannot be your wife in this world, at least she can free you to find happiness with another. The words hit Sam harder than any physical blow. Even facing death, Clara was thinking of his well-being, trying to give him permission to move on from their lost love. But the very gesture only proved how impossible that would be. No other woman could ever fill the space Clara occupied in his heart. Sam looked out at the warriors waiting on the ridge. Their patience was clearly running thin, and he could see some of them shifting restlessly in their saddles. Soon, they would demand action, either the return of Little Wolf or retribution for his apparent capture by a white man. But Sam found himself thinking beyond the immediate danger. Clara was sick, possibly dying, and trapped in a situation that prevented her from seeking help from the white world. The boy had risked everything to reach him, traveling across dangerous territory to deliver his mother's final message. There had to be another way. There had to be some solution that didn't end in bloodshed or eternal separation. "Little Wolf," Sam said, kneeling down to meet the boy at eye level, "how far is your village from here?" 2 days' ride to the north, in the valley beyond the tall rocks. "And the warriors outside? They're here to take you home." The boy nodded. "My grandfather leads them. He is war chief of our band, and I did not return. He feared I had been killed or taken captive." Sam's mind raced through possibilities. He could simply let the boy go, return to his lonely existence, and try to find some way to live with the knowledge that Clara was alive but forever beyond his reach. It would be the safe choice. It's a sensible choice. But Sam had never been one to take the safe path when something important was at stake. He'd fought in the war not because it was safe, but because it was right. He'd chosen to make his home on the dangerous frontier not because it was easy, but because it offered the kind of freedom and possibility that called to his soul. Now, faced with the chance to see Clara again if it meant walking into the heart of a Crow village where he might not be welcome, Sam knew he couldn't simply let that opportunity slip away. "Little Wolf," he said carefully, "what would happen if I came back with you? If I came to help Clara?" The boy's eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been hope. "You would do that? You would come to our village, if it meant seeing her again, helping her?" Yes. I would risk anything for that chance." Little Wolf was quiet for a long moment, considering. "My grandfather is angry, but he is also wise.
He knows.
My mother saved his grandson's life. If you came as a healer, as someone trying to help her, he might allow it." "Might? There are no promises in such things. but my mother always said you were a man of great courage. She said, if anyone could find a way to bridge two worlds, it would be you. Sam looked out at the waiting warriors again, then back at Clara's photograph on the mantel. The woman in that image had risked everything to save the life of a child, even when it meant sacrificing her own freedom and happiness. How could he do any less? Then we go to them, Sam said, rising and moving toward his gun belt. No weapons, Little Wolf said quickly. If you carry guns, they will see you as an enemy. Sam hesitated, then unbuckled his gun belt and hung it on a peg by the door. Walking unarmed into a potentially hostile situation went against every instinct. He developed during his years on the frontier, but he understood the wisdom of the boy's words. Trust had to start somewhere, and it might as well start with him. He gathered a few supplies, medical herbs from Clara's old collection. She'd kept all these years, some food, and a change of clothes. Everything else could wait. Everything else was less important than the chance to see the woman he'd never stopped loving. Sam and Little Wolf stepped out of the cabin together, the morning sun now fully risen and bathing the landscape in golden light. The warriors on the ridge had noticed the movement and were beginning to descend toward the ranch, their horses picking careful paths down the steep slope. At their head rode a man who was clearly the leader, tall, dignified with silver streaking. His long black hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command, his weathered face was set in stern lines. But his eyes held the intelligence and depth that Sam had learned to associate with true leaders. The war party reached the bottom of the ridge and arranged themselves in a semicircle around Sam's cabin, close enough to demonstrate their strength, but far enough back to avoid seeming immediately threatening. The leader rode forward alone, stopping his horse just a few yards away from where Sam and Little Wolf stood. For a long moment, the two men studied each other in silence. Sam could feel the weight of cultural differences, historical grievances, and mutual suspicion hanging in the air between them. But he could also sense something else, a shared concern for the child who stood between them, and for the woman who had brought them together. Little Wolf stepped forward and spoke rapidly, in what Sam assumed was the Crow language. He gestured toward Sam several times, and Sam caught Clara's name mentioned more than once. The war chief's expression gradually shifted from hostility to curiosity, and finally, to something that might have been cautious hope. You are the man my daughter speaks of, the chief said in English that was heavily accented but perfectly clear. The one she was to marry. Sam was surprised by the word daughter. But then he realized that Clara's adoption into the tribe would have made her family in every sense that mattered to these people. Yes, sir. I am Sam Crawford. I am Stone Bear, war chief of the Morning Star Band. My daughter has spoken of you many times. She has great sadness because she cannot return to you. Little Wolf tells me she's sick. Stone Bear's face darkened with worry. The fever has returned. She grows weaker each day. Our medicine man has done what he can, but he shrugged, a gesture that conveyed both helplessness and resignation. I'd like to help her, if you'll allow it. You are white. My people have learned to be careful around white men. Sam understood the distrust, even respected it. The history between native peoples and white settlers was written in blood and broken promises. And he couldn't blame Stone Bear for his caution. I don't come as a representative of the white world, Sam said carefully. I come as a man who loves your daughter and wants to help her heal. Stone Bear studied him for another long moment, then looked down at Little Wolf. The boy spoke again in Crow, his young voice earnest and persuasive. Whatever he said seemed to tip the balance in Sam's favor. You will come with us, Stone Bear. Decided, but understand, if you bring harm to my people, if this is some trick or trap, you will not leave our valley alive. I understand, and understand also. Even if you help her recover, that does not mean she can return to your world. The bonds that hold her among us are strong and cannot easily be broken. Sam nodded, though the words cut deep. Just seeing Clara, again, knowing she was alive and well, would have to be enough. He couldn't ask for more without risking the delicate trust that was building between him and Stone Bear. Within an hour, Sam found himself riding north alongside nearly 200 Crow warriors, his horse surrounded but not confined. Little Wolf rode beside him, serving as translator and guide, while Stone Bear led the procession with the dignity of a man who carried the hopes and fears of his people on his shoulders. The journey took them through some of the most beautiful country Sam had ever seen: rolling hills covered in autumn grass, crystal clear streams that reflected the sky like mirrors, and distant mountains that scraped the clouds with their snow-covered peaks. It was the kind of landscape that reminded a man why the frontier called to certain souls, why some people chose freedom and danger over safety and certainty as they rode. Little Wolf told Sam more about Clara's life among the Crow. She had indeed saved the chief's grandson, a boy named Running Elk, who had been burning with fever when she first arrived. Her knowledge of herbs and healing, combined with her gentle manner and genuine care for others, had quickly earned her a place of respect in the village. She teaches the children to read and write, Little Wolf explained. Not just in English, but in our own language too. She has helped preserve stories that were being lost. She always loved teaching, Sam said, remembering Clara's work with the children in Bitter Creek and her visits to the Crow village that had ultimately led to her. The next morning, Stone Bear called a council of the tribal elders. Sam and Clara were invited to attend, along with Little Wolf, who would serve as translator when needed. The meeting took place in the center of the village, with the entire community gathered in a large circle to witness the proceedings. Stone Bear spoke first. Addressing his people in their native language and explaining the situation, Sam couldn't understand the words, but he could read the emotions on the faces around him: concern, disagreement, curiosity, and in some cases, sympathy. When Stone Bear finished, other elders spoke in turn. Some voices were raised in anger, others in support. The debate went on for hours, with passionate arguments on both sides of the question. Finally, the eldest member of the council, a woman whose age-lined face spoke of decades of wisdom, stood to address the group. She spoke slowly and deliberately, her words carrying the weight of absolute authority. When she finished, the entire village fell silent. Stone Bear turned to Sam and Clara. White Dove has spoken. She says that love is a gift from the Creator, and that to stand in the way of true love is to offend the spirits. But he added, raising a hand to forestall their joy, there is a condition. What condition? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You must prove that your love is strong enough to bridge two worlds. If you choose to be together, you must also choose to serve as a bridge between our peoples to work for peace. An understanding between the Crow and the white settlers. Sam felt his heart racing. It was more than he'd dared to hope for, but also a tremendous responsibility. What would that mean exactly? White Dove herself answered, speaking in slow but clear English. You would be welcome here always as family. But you would also return to your world, carrying our words and our hopes. When there is trouble between our peoples, you would stand in the middle, helping both sides to understand. It would be dangerous, Stone Bear added. There are white men who would see you as a traitor, and native people who would see you as spies. You would never be fully accepted by either world. Sam looked at Clara, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. It wasn't the life they'd originally planned, but it was a life together. More than that, it was a chance to make a real difference, to help heal some of the wounds that divided their world. We'll do it, Clara said firmly. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, we'll do it. The council deliberated for another hour before reaching their final decision. White Dove rose again and spoke a single word in Crow that needed no translation. The word was clearly yes. 8. The village erupted in celebration, with some people cheering and others looking less certain about the decision. But the choice had been made, and Sam could see that even those who disagreed would respect the wisdom of their elders. That evening, as the celebration continued around them, Sam and Clara walked hand in hand to the river where they'd first glimpsed each other across the years of separation. The water reflected the stars like scattered diamonds, and the sound of its gentle flow seemed to whisper promises of better days ahead. Are you sure about this? Sam asked, still hardly believing that their impossible dream might become reality. Leaving your life here, taking on such a difficult responsibility? Clara turned to face him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Sam, for 3 years I've been living half a life. I've been grateful for the kindness of these people, and I'll always consider them family. But I've never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping that somehow we'd find our way back to each other. The work they're asking us to do, it won't be easy. There's so much hatred and misunderstanding between our peoples, and it's work that needs to be done," Clara said simply. "And who better to do it than to people who've learned that love can bridge any divide?" Sam pulled her into his arms, feeling the rightness of her presence against him, the completion that only she could bring to his life. "I love you, Clara. I never stopped loving you, not for a single day. I love you too, more than words can." Say they kissed then, under the endless western sky, with the sound of celebration echoing from the village behind them. It was a kiss that spoke of years of separation, of pain transformed into joy, of love that had endured every test the harsh frontier could devise. 3 days later, Sam and Clara were married in a ceremony that blended both native and Christian traditions. Little Wolf stood proudly beside them, the child who had brought them together, and who would always hold a special place in their hearts. Stone Bear himself performed part of the ceremony, speaking words of blessing in both Crow and English. "May your love be a bridge between worlds," he said. "May your children grow up knowing that all people are part of the same human family." As they exchanged rings, Clara's original engagement ring returned to her finger where it belonged. Sam thought about the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. Starving child, a desperate journey, a village full of strangers who had become family, all of it had led to this perfect moment of reunion and new beginning. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing and singing and feasting that brought together traditions from both cultures. Sam marveled at how natural it felt, how easily love could overcome the barriers that seemed so insurmountable from a distance. When the festivities finally wound down, Sam and Clara retired to a tipi that had been prepared especially for them. Inside, they found gifts from various members of the tribe, blankets and tools and beautiful handmade items that would help them start their new life together. "So what now?" Clara asked, as they settled down together for their first night as husband and wife. "Where do we begin this work they've asked us to do?" Sam pulled her close, savoring the warmth of her body against his and the miracle of having her back in his arms. "I think we start small," he said thoughtfully. "We go back to my ranch, but we keep the door open between our two worlds. We invite people from both sides to visit to see that we're not so different after all. And when there's trouble, we ride toward it instead of away from it, put ourselves in the middle, and refuse to let fear and hatred win." Clara smiled, the expression transforming her face with its radiance. "It sounds like the kind of life that would make a difference. It sounds like the kind of life worth living." Sam agreed. They spent their wedding night talking about their dreams and plans, making up for 3 years of lost conversations. They spoke of the children they hoped to have, children who would grow up knowing both worlds and serving as living proof that love could conquer prejudice. They talked about the ranch they would build together, a place that would welcome visitors from all backgrounds and serve as a symbol of what was possible when people chose understanding over fear. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold that reminded Sam of that first morning when he'd awakened to find warriors on his ridge, Clara fell asleep in his arms, but Sam remained awake, watching the sunrise and thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. A starving child had appeared at his ranch, carrying with him the key to everything Sam had lost. In helping that child, Sam had unknowingly set in motion a chain of events that would restore his greatest love and give his life new purpose. It occurred to him that this was how the best changes happened, not through grand gestures or dramatic proclamations, but through small acts of kindness that rippled outward in ways no one could predict. He had fed a hungry child and offered shelter to a stranger, never imagining that these simple acts would lead to the redemption of his broken heart. Over the following weeks, Sam and Clara prepared for their return to his ranch. The entire village contributed to their preparations, offering supplies, advice, and blessings for the journey ahead. Little Wolf would come with them, continuing his education while serving as a bridge between the two families that had claimed him. Stone Bear took Sam aside on their final day in the village. "You understand what you have agreed to," the war chief said. There will be white men who call you Indian lover, squaw man. There will be times when our own people doubt your motives. The path you have chosen is not an easy one. The easy path rarely leads anywhere worth going, Sam replied. Claire and I understand the risks, but we also understand the opportunity. If we can help even a few people see past their prejudices, if we can prevent even one conflict through understanding, instead of violence, then whatever we suffer will be worthwhile. Stone Bear nodded approvingly. My daughter chose her husband well. You will always be welcome in this village, and if you have children, they will be welcome here as well. They will learn the stories of both their peoples and grow up to be bridges between worlds. The journey back to Sam's ranch took 3 days, during which Clara marveled at the landscape she was seeing for the first time as a free woman. Everything looked different through the lens of hope and possibility, and she found herself making plans for improvements to the property, additions that would accommodate visitors from both cultures. When they finally crested the ridge that looked down on Sam's modest cabin and barn, Clara laughed with delight. It's exactly as I imagined it, she said. Exactly as you described in your letters. It's been waiting for you, Sam said simply. Everything has been waiting for you. They spent their first weeks back at the ranch making preparations for their new,